Amen. Thank you. Okay, so here's our agenda today. We'll have 6 presentations. If we get through them fast enough, then Tony Spencer has, as our guest speaker, he'll be the High Councilman. I didn't even put him on here because I don't think we're going to go short, but if we do, he's got a great presentation that's going to cover a whole bunch of topics. I did put this slide together before I knew what Tony was going to talk about, and he says he's going to cover about half of these things. So we're going to focus on the areas that I just showed you, but there are a whole bunch of other topics that were presented at Build. And so if you have time and you want to look into some of the other things that were presented, then I encourage you to go out to the Microsoft Build 2018 website and go look up things that you're interested in. If nothing else, the keynotes were important. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about serverless. How many people, by show of hands, have heard the term serverless? How many people have actually used anything that was serverless? Okay, it's fairly new that way. In the session that I'm going to talk about, this BRK 2137, the title was What's New for Serverless Computing in Azure? And they started out by taking out the word new and just saying, what is serverless computing with Azure? And so they kind of made a definition of serverless. And I just want to warn you, there are servers involved with serverless, just like there's wires involved with wireless. So somewhere there's a wire, somewhere there's a server. Okay, they just didn't vanish. So, but you don't have to take care of them. So they made an analogy where they likened it onto transportation. They talked about you need to get somewhere, so you go buy a car. Well, that's great, but now you have all these bad things that come with that, owning it, maintaining it, all that kind of stuff. IaaS, infrastructure as a service, is like if you lease a car, there's some things that the company will do for you, you don't have to worry about. If platform as a service, there's more things that you can offload to other people, but you still are paying for it. So if I'm going to the airport and I'm gone for 2 weeks, I pay for that rental car the whole time it's parked in the parking lot for those 2 weeks, even though I'm not even using it. But I need it to be there when I get to go back home. So the idea behind serverless is more like Uber, where I need to get from my house to the airport, and then I don't want to pay for it while I'm gone, but then when I come back, I do need another ride from the airport back to my house. So you only pay for what you need. And I'm going to really slip through these pretty fast because before I didn't have a demo working, and so I had to rely on the slides. Tony told me that was really boring, so I said, okay, I'll get the demo working. So now I have the demo going, and so I'm going to flip through the slides so that we can have time at the end. But there are other terms related to serverless, some things like functions as a service or containers as a service. These things will come into play as you're learning more about serverless. In specifically Azure Service provided by Microsoft, they provide a development environment and a platform. So there's the development environment is things that you're used to already, Visual Studio Code. You right click, you publish, it goes out to the cloud. So some things that are very similar, and then some new things like event grids, so when events happen, you get notified. Logic apps, where you can define your workflow. Azure Functions, which I'm going to do demo of right here, and then some services that come with that. Okay, let's jump over to Visual Studio. And what could go wrong with live coding? Okay, so here's the portal. Whoops. I said, here's the portal. Okay, so if you haven't been to Azure, you go to Microsoft.com and go to the portal. You sign in with your account. Go into create a resource. And then go down to serverless functions app. Now, we want just a function, but what you have to do is you have to create an app, kind of a wrapper, a container around this function. But once you create the function, in other code, in your web service, in your front end, whatever, you can call or make a REST call right directly to your function. So we'll show that. So you have to give a name, you have to give it a resource group. If you don't have one, you can create a brand new one, so forth. I've already created one, so I'm not going to go through this, but it's as simple as just filling out a few fields, hitting the create button. So if I go to all services that I've created on my dashboard, and I go to, that's not what I wanted. I don't want resource groups. Sorry, there it was. I'm just not patient enough to wait for it to load. Okay, so I do have a couple of Azure functions out here that I've been playing around with, and what's that? I hit storage. I can't.
Is it pinned to your desktop, the one that says Jim get started?
Yeah, it probably is.
Go look to the right.
Oh, too late.
Click on that,
Okay.
then go back.
All right, so I can get, I can search for my apps that I've written. If I start a brand new one, then it would give me some sample code, which I think I have here. And by default, you pass it a name as a parameter on your URL, and then it will return you back saying hello name. So it looks like, now I'm using the portal and it has an IDE here where I can edit this and I can create this and do whatever thing I want, and then I can save it and run it. But it also has an extension in Visual Studio Code, and it has a template in Visual Studio, so you can just create it in your environment that you're used to. So here's the code. It says, okay, it's gonna take the query parameters that are passed in. It's gonna look for the name parameter on the URL. If it doesn't find it, then it's gonna look in the body of the request. So that's another way to pass in the value that I want to pass in. If it still doesn't have a name, then it's going to tell you what to do. You have to pass in a name. If it does have a name, then it's going to say hello. So I can run this here in this little IDE, and you can see over here that I've passed in the name Azure, and so when it ran, it said hello Azure. Well, that's kind of impressive, I guess. No clapping, no clapping. Nothing fancy about that. But I can go to this URL right here. So if I copy that, go into a browser, paste that in, and then I'll need to say, I don't want to say name equals Azure because I'm not doing a commercial. I want to do name equals Jim, and it should say, okay, well, there's no CSS for my XAMPP, for my XML, so it printed out a little bit more than I wanted. I wanted it to just say hello Jim, so I could go ahead and play around with the CSS for XML. Okay, but that's not really that useful for what I'm trying to do here today. What I really want is something more like my own custom thing, not the just out of the box hello world. I want to do a random number. So is somebody connected to Teams meeting and not muting their microphone? Thank you. Okay, so in this case, what I've done is I'm getting an echo now. So somebody mute your microphone, please. So here, if I run this, it's going to, and I've passed in the name Azure. Why am I passing in the name Azure? Okay, so it's not going to find that. It's going to find the query parameter. So I go to here and put in the name of my parameter, which is Max. I cannot spell. And a value, let's say there's 31 people in here. So if I was going to get a random number, it would be an error. Okay, that's cool. So let's go to my other function that does work. All right, so here I can do max 23 in the body. I can run that, and it gives me a random number of 22. If I run it again, 21, it's counting down backwards. Okay, 17, 1. Okay, so you can see that it totally is random. Anyway, let's go back to the slides. So it's pretty simple. There's not a lot of code to get something working. There are triggers that you can specify. In this case, we're doing an HTTP trigger so that if I call that URL, it's going to trigger my function to kick off, run, return a result, and then go back to sleep. So I only get charged, I only get billed for when it's actually doing something. When it gets called, it loads up, it runs, and then it goes to sleep. So that's, again, like the example of the Uber driver. There's other things that will trigger it. Tim, we're not taking questions until afterwards. All right, what's your question?
So you could spin up a database service separately, and this could be accessing the database on trigger on your response and check out.
Exactly. So if I set this up to blob storage, anytime a new image or file or whatever is put in blob storage, that would trigger my function to do some filtering on it, to do some resizing of it, to do whatever it needs to do on that. It would just be live long enough to do its function and then go back to sleep. So If you're looking to save money, if you're using the cloud, but you're finding that it's costing more than you need, then, all right. Rich says I'm talking way too long. So this session that I watched had a whole bunch of demos. There were 6 different demos with each focusing on the different use cases that you would want to use serverless for. There had a bunch of announcements that came out during the session, Python support, etc. There was a thing they called durable functions. So if you had a bunch of different Azure functions, but you need to save state in between each call to a function, then it would do that. You could use durable functions. If you wanted to fan out to go, one thing kicks off a whole bunch of stuff, but then you need to congregate all that stuff back and to put it into one output, you can do that with multiple functions and using durable functions. Other kinds of things that you can do with that. So I would suggest you look into that. Finally, they had a guy talking about security. So around serverless, since it's new, hackers are right on top of new technology as it comes out, so security has to also be there. And there's a company called PureSec that helps avoid some of the things. Here are all the related serverless sessions. I don't even know if I got them all, but there was a ton of stuff out there. So Microsoft is really pushing this hard, and it's a great technology for you to save money and still get the value you need from the cloud. If you don't have time for all these, the one that I would really recommend is serverless in action. So if you're actually going to do something with it, you can actually put it into production. They give 13 really good tips and tricks to the problems that you may run into, performance issues, debugging things. There's a lot of great information about in that presentation about actually using them in real life. Okay, with that, we're done. I will hand it over to Dennis and Danny. Good time.
Come on, computer.
Okay, so we're going to demo VSLive, and it's in preview. You need to be on the latest Visual Studio, not like the latest 2017. You need version 15.7, I think.
They also have extensions for VS Code and on the Mac as well, both Visual Studio and VS Code for the Mac. So any of those products can use it.
What's the version you need?
Newer than .6 on the last revision number. The upgrade for me took about 30 minutes.
I got 15.6.7 right here.
So you probably,
Let's need 15.7.
7.
15.7, okay.
come on.
VSLife Share is what it's called, and it's in preview.
There it goes, my goodness.
But once you get that installed, you get this little share up here in the corner. So I've got a bug, and I'm going to share with Danny, and he's going to fix my bug.
And my computer is completely rebooting.
That's okay. I'll take the time.
Yeah.
So everyone just share with Danny whenever you have any bugs. Is that how it works?
That's right. I don't fix my own bugs. I write my bugs, and Danny fixes them. So I click the share. Takes a little bit, and you'll get a link automatically copied to your desktop or to your clipboard that looks like this. So I'm going to send him that link. It's just a URL that he hits. And I've got this little yellow thing saying, hey, you're sharing. Gives you some info. You can copy the link again. So there's some other things involved with the sharing. I can share servers that are running on my PC. So this is running an IIS. So if I spin this up, so I can see what port it's running on. I also want to share my local IIS instance with Danny.
There we go. Got the link. Okay.
So it's running on 59699. So I'm going to share that port as well. So you go to Manage Share Servers, stick the port. What was it? 59699.
I think so, yeah.
So now I've shared that port with Danny. There's a couple other things here. Share terminal, and there's a read-only and a read-write. So if you really trust the guy, and we're going to show some things with the terminal too. So I'm going to share my terminal with him just to demo some things. Here's our shared terminal down here below. Okay, so I have shared my session with Danny. So Danny does not have this code at all running on his computer. The code is only on my computer. He doesn't have a copy of it. All he has is VS Code or VS, whatever you're going to use.
I'll do it in Visual Studio.
Okay. So I am going to pass it now to Danny.
All right.
Now that he's up and running.
And let's cross our fingers that this goes smoothly with the hookup here. Let's see.
There we go.
There we go. I just didn't push it in far enough. So I clicked on the link Dennis sent me. You can either go here and use Open Pick an App, or you can copy it and run it in Visual Studio. I'm going to, where's my mouse? There we are. I'm going to use Visual Studio. The other option is if you copy that link, you can go into Visual Studio and just on the, I believe it's just right on the file drop down, you can go right into join a live share. It's just right, join collaboration session, and then you just paste the link in there. So you can do it either way once somebody sends you a link. So this is opening that session, and my computer's thinking about it. Give myself a little more space.
So you can't see on my screen, I just got a little pop-up that says, hey, Danny's trying to join, do you want him to join? So even though I've sent him the link, I still have to approve him joining my live share.
And as you can see, I'm running Dennis's terminal. And just for fun, I'm going to, what was that file called we wanted?
Format my hard drive.
I just deleted a file in a C drive.
So that's admin. That's admin rights. And I don't know if that's because I'm running Visual Studio as administrator. I haven't really tested that yet, but.
So the word for the wise is don't share read write unless you really trust the person. I could go. I'm sure that wouldn't work, obviously, but the terminal can be handy, obviously, depending on what you're doing. But just wanted to show that because it does give, if it's writable, then you've got admin on that screen, or on that device, I should say. So that's something to be mindful of if you share a terminal. Let's go ahead and pull this down and start looking. So we're on this live share. Right now, I'm set up so with this little gold thing, right, that little ring around that, that means that my session's going to follow wherever Dennis is moving to. So notice he clicks somewhere and it goes there. Now, if Dennis types something, then I'm going to see that, and if I type something, he'll see that. We even played around with it, and we could be on the same line, and of course, it kind of merges and does weird things, but it's very collaborative in that way.
So you can't quite do the Google Docs thing yet?
Oh, it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's about like that.
You can both edit the same file
Yeah.
at the same time.
And it's just happening, and so like we had somebody, one of us was going like 1, 2, 3, 4, and the other was going like ABCs, and you get 1, 2, 3 ABC, like just mixing in as you're both typing.
Yeah,
That's
that's what I mean. In Google Docs, you can have you typing your cursor and him typing his cursor in a different position at the same time.
It could be a different file.
Yes, different
Yeah.
files.
yeah, and it works. So the other thing, so part of what's neat about this, so Dennis was telling me about it. He's got a bug where when he runs this, well, let's go ahead and just run it. Localhost, what was it again? Oh,
So
actually, I can just
Yeah,
go
show them up there.
join, view shared servers, and I can just open that in browser. And we're just going to go right to Swagger on that. So we've got this guy right here, and when we try it out, let's see.
Execute.
Oh, where's execute? Right there. Thank you. All right. So we run that. And we're getting these responses back. Smith, Robert, Smith, Frank. Well, apparently his customers aren't quite happy with that. They wanted it to be Robert Smith. It's a really complicated bug. So I can navigate through here. I can peak definition, go to implementation, whatever I want. I can come in here, and I'm just taking around here. And I can maybe go and set a breakpoint. And then whether Dennis or myself, we are debugging. Dennis started the session. We did play around with this. The person that joins cannot start a debug session. They can stop it, and then they can try to reattach to it. But it's the person that initiates that has to start the debug session.
So you see, he just set a breakpoint. I got that breakpoint on my machine too.
And now if we try this again, if I hit execute, I just hit that breakpoint, and I have the full watch. I can do immediates, I can do a watch, I can, let's see, we'll just watch students, if I can type. Except I have a syntax error. Like I said, if I can type, that'd be great, but. So we have the student, and we can do all those watches, and I'm just poking around here, and I'm like, oh, well, here's your bug. So I can go ahead and Dennis is seeing that change in real time, and just, I'm gonna go ahead. So there you go, Dennis, I fixed your bug. So that's live share. I can navigate to other files, and so I can maybe go in here, controllers, and I'll go to, I don't know, we'll go here.
Hit continue.
Oh, maybe I want to hit continue, is that what you're saying? Yeah, and so I just made that change, and we see Robert Smith as a cyclist rock according. So now I'm looking at launch settings.json, and let's say I'm looking at this file. If I find something there and I want to show that to Dennis, I can go like this, and I can say focus participants, and that'll pop a little thing on his screen and ask him to follow. Or if I believe I can click that and I'm following him, I think he can click something on his to follow me. So those are great ways you can collaborate and work around. I personally feel like when I'm just helping somebody who even is maybe one desk over from me, this is easier than talking over his shoulder and saying, okay, put your mouse there, hey, navigate the, okay, can I just have your mouse? And then he's left-handed, and then I'm like, no. So whether or not you're working remotely, this has great value. Again, you need to update Visual Studio past the revision number 6, so at least 7. And you'll need to get the VSLive extension out of the extensions gallery. I think all said it took me about 45 minutes to get it all installed. It's not super fast. It's faster in VS Code, so
I
to
was
install
already
it.
on 15.7, so it was like 3 minutes for me to.
Okay, well, Dennis is cooler than I am.
So we can share not just one person. I can share that link with the whole team, and we can have the whole team on here looking, maybe for a code review or something like that.
And a few other, we didn't dive into this, but the documentation does mention as well, you can exclude files. So if you have, I don't know, a config file that's maybe got some sensitive connection strings in it or whatever, you can specifically exclude certain files from a live share so that you're not letting somebody have access to something too sensitive. And again, you just be mindful of that, be mindful of the terminal so that somebody doesn't delete things off your drive or whatever. But it's a great tool. Yeah.
Just one more comment. I think one thing that may not be apparent here is Danny doesn't even necessarily have this project on his machine. It only exists on Dennis's machine. When the share kicks up, it pushes all that in kind of simulated mode over to Danny. And as soon as the session's done, it's gone. He doesn't have that project on his machine.
Yeah, I've joked about doing this instead of setting up a new developer's laptop because getting our environments with Oracle set up is such a pain. I'm like, I'll just turn Visual Studio on and live share with the new guy. No, in the back, yeah.
So we tested a little bit of cross-platform. I'm typically running VS Code on Linux.
Okay.
Worked just fine. I connected to somebody who was running on Windows with a C#, and in this instance of VS Code, I didn't have all the C# add-ons installed. It installed all those locally. The project wasn't local. I don't know if that's built in or not. But then the sharing worked, and we wrote lots of this code remotely. Worked great cross-platform.
That's cool. So just to repeat for people that are on remote, he was talking about even cross-platform, Linux to Windows and Mac and whatnot, and it even was doing a good job with some of the C# add-ons and whatnot that project depended on. This is still in preview, but as we've played around with it, it's pretty impressive.
It's open preview.
Yeah, so that was one of the things I saw that I was most excited about, which is why we're sharing it.
Can you check in as Dennis?
No. I also, you'll notice on mine, I don't have an actual project. I have this, and so I don't have a project that's set as a startup. So Dennis has to initiate the debug sessions.
But if
So-
you've got terminal access, you can go into the terminal and check in from there.
Yeah, that's true.
Get pushed.
Yep. Okay, so people that are better at command prompts than I am could check in as Dennis. I'm not much of a command prompt guy. I'm one of those guys that likes the visual and Visual Studio. So. Yeah, and another?
Did you have to run that as admin to get this to all work, or can you run it as a regular user and get it all?
No, you can run it as a regular user. I just, by default, my Visual Studio is running in admin, so.
Yeah. Cool.
Thanks, guys. John, you're up.
I didn't get the memo about slides, so here's a couple slides in here. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Sean Nielsen on the Platform as a Service team. And I'm asked to talk about Cosmo DB a little bit and some containers. Just out of curiosity, has anybody ever heard of Cosmos DB? Okay, this database is awesome. I've fallen in love with this thing. It's just so cool. But basically, one of the huge advantage points of Cosmos DB is Microsoft built this database from the ground up with multi-region in mind. The whole database was created with multi-region. Oh, is that not showing?
We can say that.
There you go. All right. So this database has one of the big things that they announced at this conference was actually the multi-master write support. Last year was the first year they actually had this database, but this year they're adding multi-write support, and they've had incredible adoption on it. I think in some of the Gartner quadrants, it's actually in the upper right section. Oh, and just a little disclaimer, I'm not authoritative on database in the organization. I'm just presenting to the organization what I learned from Microsoft. So if you want to do this, make sure you go through enterprise architecture and make sure that your project is approved to use it. But I'm not authoritative on it. It has unlimited read and write scalability, guaranteed single digit read and write. So you could have across the globe, a region in Singapore, a region in the US West, and 5 nines of uptime for all of that, which I think is pretty cool. Just a couple things about the database itself is you can actually use any one of these APIs and data models for it. So it doesn't just support SQL, but it has Mongo, Cassandra, table storage. So different types of data models can be used in it. Azure, Jim talked about Azure Functions a little bit. I would say most of the presentations I went to, there was a combination of Azure Functions somewhere in there with Cosmo DB. They're just like hand in hand going together. Cosmo DB, Azure Functions. And has anybody ever heard of the Open Service Broker framework? So this is an initiative that a lot of the major cloud providers are offering, and it's to standardize on the way that their services are actually exposed. So you could have different types of platforms. For instance, like our organization uses Cloud Foundry, but because they expose their services through an open service broker framework, we don't have to do like tons of integrations, and then that we can just consume that inside of our marketplace. Same thing with like OpenShift, they use it. If you were using like Kubernetes, they could use it. But I'm actually just gonna show you, we'll see if the audio works here. I wanted to show you this short little clip here.
Remember, this is not just a regular app. This is a globally distributed application. Building such apps is really, really challenging. Azure Cosmos DB, as a natively built in the cloud service, was carefully engineered with multi-tenancy and global distribution from the ground up. With its turnkey global distribution capability, I can come to the world map, I can pick the regions where I want my data to be, click the save button, and that's it. The data gets seamlessly replicated and becomes available for query locally in those regions. And as I'm adding and removing those regions, my application does not need to be paused or redeployed. It continues to be highly available thanks to the multi-homing capability that Cosmos DB provides. Now, the key thing that I want you all to remember is that independent of the data scale, whether you're working with a petabyte or hundreds of petabytes of data, independent of the data model or the data distribution, or potential failures that may occur when you're running at such a massive scale, Cosmos DB continues to provide you with a single system image for all of these globally distributed resources. This is something that no other database in the world can offer you today. Now, the multi-master, and not just any multi-master, but the multi-master at true global scale. With its natively built-in multi-master capabilities in Cosmos DB, application developers get numerous
So I just want to, I think that's amazing that you can do this with the multi-region support. I don't know if any of you guys, who here has like a business continuity requirement? If Provo goes down, are you guys a little bit scared of what's going to happen to your business? I mean, I just think this is incredible where you don't have to worry about it. And I'm going to just show you a little preview here inside. So I'm in the Azure portal right here. I've pre-created this Azure, this Cosmo DB, but this is basically what she's talking about. So in here, these are the various regions that I have, and then I can come down here and say, hey, I want to add another region in here, and I just click the little button and say save, and now it's deploying my database to this other region. And if I wanted to remove regions, I can unclick it and do the exact same thing. And so if you think about your business in the context of like more and more these data sovereignty laws are coming out of, I have to have my data over here, I have to have my data over here, and it can't mix, or this is an incredible solution for that. Instead of engaging a team and having this huge initiative to set up a data center or to provision out, this is like some clicks of the button of the mouse. Is this useful to anybody? I think this is really cool. So that's on the Cosmos side. I wanted to talk a little bit on the container side as well. So containers. Has anybody ever deployed a Docker container or run something in Docker locally or anything like that? If you haven't heard of containers, it's a big move in the industry. So you can kind of package up your application basically in this little box, and you throw this little box wherever you want it to go. And Docker is kind of the main container that the industry has standardized on. So Azure supports 3 different types of open source containerizations. They've got DCOS, Docker Swarm, and Kubernetes. They are working on Kubernetes for Windows, and that's kind of in a preview mode right now. One of the big things in the industry about Kubernetes is it's really, I mean, this is becoming the de facto standard for containers. The major providers like Google, Azure, AWS, they all support it. And because those 3 providers all support it, even if there was a better one before, I think the industry is really standardizing on those. Microsoft's managed version of Kubernetes is called AKS, and that manages the different clusters and pods. When I say clusters and pods in Kubernetes land, that basically means like if you have an application, maybe it's a web server and you have backend databases and you have maybe a 3-tier architecture, that the clusters and pods is basically the structure where you can deploy that. So that would be like a cluster that's deployed, and the pods are kind of the individual units of that. But from Azure's perspective, it's actually pretty easy. You just run these 4 commands. Anybody ever played around with the Azure command line? You guys play around with it a little bit? Well, this is the Azure command line. You just run basically 4 commands, and then at the end you have Kubernetes. This kubectl is kind of the command line interface for Kubernetes. It allows you to deploy and whatnot. Kubernetes has 2 different types. There's a couple ways of deploying Helm charts. So if you have like all these little pods and configurations in Docker and you want to like push them all up together instead of just pushing one Docker file here, one Docker file there, they use something called Helm charts, and that basically is like a template or a structure of how you want all of the components of your application to be deployed. So that makes it a little easier. Something a little bit new that they were presenting was this tool called Draft. And have any of you guys deployed to Cloud Foundry before? Just out of curiosity, a few of you guys. Cloud Foundry, just to kind of compare it, Cloud Foundry uses a term called build packs. So you take like a .NET Core application and you push it, and then Cloud Foundry goes, oh, this looks like a .NET Core application. And then it kind of finds the bits for that. Draft is similar. The only difference is Draft is kind of run on your local. So you would run this Draft and it goes, oh, this is a .NET Core app. But then it packages it up ready to deploy to Kubernetes. But similar in concept. And so just to kind of wrap up a little bit, how does this apply to ICS? I think Cosmo DB, if you're thinking about global like data sovereignty laws that you might have specific requirements on. I think it has a huge play in there. If you're thinking about business continuity, I mean, it was pretty hard to like push that button, so or click that, but so if you feel like you can drag your mouse up there and click it, you might have business continuity. Multi-region presence. Maybe you have a distributed force, like maybe you're the missionary workforce and you want you're distributed globally like that. Kubernetes, just kind of bringing this back from an ICS perspective, gives, the nice thing is it's a consistent model. So like if we deploy to Azure, we deploy to AWS, we deploy on premise, that can be a consistent model. And that consistent model is also similar to the way Cloud Foundry is today. Just a couple other things on that too. I talked with, there's Gabe, I don't remember his last name, but he is over containers for Microsoft, and I talked to him after the presentation. And one of the challenges that they're facing with Kubernetes is higher up than VMs, so I think that's a lot easier for people. You get a Docker container, but he's saying they're still getting requests for it to be even higher than that. So people don't have to think about even putting together this Helm chart. But he said they're actually working on integrations with these other providers like Cloud Foundry and OpenShift to make that higher level. So they might actually have backend, like Cloud Foundry sits on top of Kubernetes where the orchestration is done behind the scenes. But I thought that was kind of interesting. The other thing is, so OpenShift is another one. But I think from our team's perspective, you'll probably see movement in this direction, but we're kind of watch the industry a little bit and see how it goes and see if they get merged together or whatnot. But that's it.
That was cool, Sean. Let's see. Hey, all right, everybody's there? All the food groups are represented? All right, Microsoft Build 2018 in 5 minutes or less. Not really. I'm going to do just luckily a lot of us have covered a lot of the things that I thought were already cool, so I'm just going to show you some sessions that you probably shouldn't skip. Top rated. This link it's helpful. It's just a link to the Channel 9 build sessions sorted by stars, so you can see which ones people already thought were good. These are the rest of them that are shown here are not sorted in that order. They were just among the first 10 pages of those that I liked. So the .NET overview and roadmap is the presentation that you always have to go to if you go to Build, because it's presented by Scott Hanselman and Scott Hunter, the Lesser Scots. It's a good way to learn a lot about .NET because Hanselman is extremely entertaining. So I'd recommend seeing that one. Obviously, look at the 2 keynotes. If you have an hour and 40 minutes to spare, you might have to take them in chunks, but what?
Hour and 40 each.
Yeah, each, yeah, for each keynote. So, yeah, but it's worth it. In the past, over time, the Channel 9 guys have gone through and indexed those by topic. It hasn't happened yet that I could see, but maybe that's coming. And if you like an exercise, there's Microsoft Technologies that'll do that. Let's leave that to you as a research project. Blockchain by Mark Rusinovich. Blockchain's an interesting technology, not just for cryptocurrency, and he talks about the other use cases that are helpful, and cryptocurrency as well, and some other interesting applications for using blockchain. Visual Studio Code tips and tricks. We've had some of those presentations here. This one was done by the guys who actually write Visual Studio Code. They're very good. It's an excellent presentation. I would recommend that one. What's new in web development is Daniel Roth, also a high energy presenter, very, very well done, and highly recommended from my perspective because it's the platform that allows you to get .NET code onto Cloud Foundry. So ASP.NET Core 2 and 2.1 is the upcoming bleeding edge version. If you only want a 20-minute exposure to Azure Cosmos DB, that's what that next session is. That's a really good quick overview if you only have a few minutes. And then supercharge your debugging in Visual Studio 2017. Just a bunch of tips and tricks about the debugger in Visual Studio. And to whet your appetite with that one, I'm going to show you one of my favorite tips. So if I can find it. I don't need this anymore. I don't even need to save it. So I have this app. I don't really have this app. I downloaded it from GitHub. But I have this recipe app, and I'm trying to get it to work. And when I search for stuff, I know this doesn't come up with anything, and I should get an exception. And yeah, there we go. I'm throwing an exception about recipes. It's like, I don't know what that is. I'm going to have to debug this.
That's not even food, right?
What, tofu? Yeah, that's fighting words in some places. So I'm going to go ahead and try to debug this. And if you're, like the typical, I'm going to hit start, and I've got some breakpoints already set, so I'm going to step into these things. This is a project that loads or a solution that loads two projects. I've got a service backend and a front end. One of these windows is going to error out. Don't worry about that. That's not the problem I'm trying to debug right now. But we will try to look at. You notice that the null came in recipes. And I want to look at this recipes value and see why I'm getting null in it and see what's in there. And I should probably debug the performance of Visual Studio too, but that's a different talk. All right, so I've hit my breakpoint, and if you're like me, recipes is an IEnumerable kind of thing. So if I hover over it, I can maybe dig into that a little bit, and there's the results. It's exactly what I want to see. And look at well, that's kind of useful. I can see that there's at least 14 of them, maybe more, 15, and then I can, if I'm really good with my mouse, I can click into those, and they're huge. So I don't need all this data. I just want to see which ones are populated and stuff. There's got to be an easier way to do this. And luckily there is an object or a technology that can come to our aid here. And it's the debugger display attribute. You attribute it over a class. So I've got a couple that I've commented out. One is just a really basic one, and one has two different pieces. So I'm pulling the title property and the ID property out of this recipe class. NQ means no quotes. It's there's another part of the presentation that talks about all the ways you can decorate some of these things. But so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to uncomment that. I'm going to save it and kick it off again really quick and see if I can get maybe some more helpful information about that recipe's IEnumerable and maybe help me debug better. I did hit start, right?
Would it really be so difficult for them to make the debugger run the toString method?
Yeah, toString is good, but you notice how big that object was, right? It wasn't. It wasn't a trivial object. There was a lot of stuff in there, and that can be helpful if you like going cross-eyed, and But there's only a couple of properties that I care about. So what this attribute?
Use the toString method gives you a customized.
Sure. Yeah, I mean you could do that, and yeah, then that's into your code instead of an attribute. I like this because for the reasons you'll see here. It doesn't affect it. There's no side effects or me messing around with it or anything like that. It's just a way for the debugger only. It's essentially you're imposing a view model over the top of the debugger of your object. So here's my recipes breakpoint again. Man, I hope this works. So let's go look in results view, and sweet. So I have all of my objects and the ID, just what I want to see. I don't have to drill into each one and be like a mouse gymnast to be able to find out which thing I need. So that's basically that. There's a whole bunch more in this particular talk that I'd recommend you go look at. But that was my favorite one, and that's what I took away from Build.
There we go. All right. Okay, so I'm going to talk about what a bot is. So at Build, they had a few sessions on bots. And so what a bot is essentially just a web service that is behind a REST endpoint. But built around your code is also this concept of what's called a channel. And a channel is just a place where your bot can execute. And tied to that is you can pull in all of Microsoft's cognitive services like Q&A Maker or sentiment analysis or whatever it is when you want to pull into your bot to make it smarter. And Microsoft made this really cool SDK called the Bot Builder SDK. And so let's see, I'm not going to presentation mode, I don't care. So the Bot Builder SDK, or the framework, what it is it's basically a collection of, there's a thing called a bot connector, and the connector lets your web service connect to the different channels, and the channels that there's a whole list of channels that are allowed, but like for example Skype for Business, Microsoft Teams, Facebook, those are all the channels that your bot can operate in. And so the bot framework makes it really easy to operate and create a bot that people can interface with just with natural conversation. And so and behind your bot, you can make it really smart because you can plug in things like Lewis, which is the language understanding, and different cognitive services that make your bot seem really intelligent. And you can also plug into the Microsoft Graph. So for you can plug into all of the rich data that Microsoft Graph allows you to get. So I was sitting there thinking about what would a bot be useful around here for? What if I just wanted to go into Teams and ask my bot, tell me my sick leave, tell me how much vacation time I have left, book travel for me. I hate every time you have to book travel. I hate having to remember the department ID. What the crap is a department ID? I don't know. I always have to ask somebody. What if there was a bot that could just do that, or whatever, schedule your out of office for you the right way so that your manager doesn't get pissed because you did the wrong thing, any number of things, or be able to do your time card right in Teams. That'd be kind of neat. Integration point bot, right, where you can ask for knowledge from that. Anyways, there's lots of ways to use bots, and so this presentation is just going to get you started, or show you how to get started. So the first thing to do if you want to get started with bots is go out here to dev.botframework.com, and before you do this, you're going to want an Azure subscription. So if you don't have one, go get that. But basically, once you've built your bot, then you can go to My Bots, and then you can publish up to Azure via this page. But for right now, what I'm going to do is if you click on documentation, it's going to take you over to this page here. And the piece that's important, or the easiest way I found to get started, was if you go down into Quick Start and then create a bot with Bot Builder SDK. You can do it with Node or .NET. But for I'm going to go over .NET today. So if you do .NET, the prerequisites are these. You have to have Visual Studio 2017 and make sure it's all up to date. And then if you click this little link right here, it's going to bring you to this page. Oh, no, it's not. It's going to bring you to a page I don't have up yet. That you download this template, and this lets you build. This gives you an application template, so you can start out building bots. And then let's see. The next thing you need is you need an emulator, because you need to be able to test your bot. And so if you go out to this URL, it's on GitHub. There's a bot framework emulators. They've got all these different releases. The one you want to grab, though, don't grab any of these ones that say pre-release. You want to go out and grab this one that says latest release. You can grab the pre-release, but
You just need that one execute.
yeah, you just need that exe, and that's what this is right here is the emulator. So so with all that, once you have all that done, you can do your first bot. So we're gonna quickly just do that. This is like the hello world of bots. Okay, it doesn't do much. It's just like hello world, just to get started. So once you've done all those things, you can just say file new project, and then in here, there's under bot frame there should be this bot builder echo bot, and then you can just say where you want it. Save. Okay, it's gonna start it up. All right, so what this gives you is it's basically just a web app. That's all it is. So it's got controllers, and then it's got these things called dialogues. And so the one controller gives you this message controller, and basically this is just a web API. So if you were to browse to the site and go to API/messages and post to that, then it would execute this code. And so all this code is doing is it's calling this root dialog that they're providing for you. So root dialog, in this case, right now, this is just an echo bot. So root dialog, all it's going to do is send a message back and say you sent, and it's going to say whatever you typed and tell you how long it was. So this is just a really dumb bot. But so if we're going to launch this real quick. And then once you're launched, so you get your website, and then you can open it in the emulator. So basically, you just point your emulator to it, you say connect, and then now I can pass it messages. So like, hello. So it responded back with, you sent hello, which was 5 characters. So this isn't really exciting, but what is exciting is once you start plugging all this stuff together. So Microsoft's provided a really rich set of things you can do with bots. And so like, this is like a list of all the stuff. So like you can do adaptive cards, you can have buttons, you can have scrollable carousels. These hero cards are really cool for displaying like data. You can have like lists and like, basically like you have whole forms in bots so that you can collect data. And they have this little thing out here where you can kind of preview some of these things, what they are. So you can go kind of see what's a hero card, and you can kind of see what those things are. But I'm not going to show you any of that because I'm going to run out of time. I wanted to show you how to use Q&A Maker as well with this, but I think I'm out of time. So Q&A Maker's cool. You can plug Q&A Maker in with your bot, and then you can make your bot. Basically, Q&A Maker is a way to be able to. It understands natural language, and then it's like this is a little Q&A Maker I made. So like, I gave it 2 things it knows. It can answer what can you do and hello and hi. So like if we click test, you can ask it a question and then it can respond. Not much yet, but I'm learning. So like, but you can basically I shouldn't have clicked that yet. So you can train it on new things. So let's say you wanted to know something new. Then in here you can go in here. You can say add Q&A pair. You can say how old is Jim Byer, and the answer could be it is hard to tell because his bald head makes him look ageless. Yeah. So if you save and train that, then you can test it. But so what you do is you plug Q&A Maker into your bot, and then the bot could look inside of your knowledge base and answer questions. And it won't look just for the exact way you wrote that question. It's smarter than that. So is Jim old? Let's see if that brings back something. It's hard to tell because his bald head makes him look ageless. There you go. So anyways, that's bots. There's a lot you can do with bots. This is just like getting started. So there's a couple more things, sorry. So these are links. There's a ton of links on the bot framework. I can provide this later if you guys want it. And then there's a whole bunch of sessions and videos on bots out on MSDN Channel 9. That's all.
Okay, thanks, John. So,
okay, we will zoom through this pretty quickly. So, Microsoft Build, I stole their slides. Here are a few of my favorite things. I'm not going to sing. But before we get into that, one of the things that I noticed at Build conferences, when I went there, I wasn't blown away with anything too earth-shattering. Now that Microsoft is living in open source, there are very few surprise announcements anymore. We're watching them build things in the open. So when we arrive at Build conference, sometimes it's like, yeah, okay, you know that thing we've been working on, it's ready now. And those are the announcements that we're seeing. We're not seeing a lot of things that are just like coming out of nowhere and shocking us. There will be some, but not as much as there were in the past. So that's kind of the new normal. So here's a few of my favorite things. Read them really quickly so I had four little areas that I kind of focused on: mobile, Windows, web, and edge computing and AI. In mobile, there was Xamarin Forms 3.0 and the remote simulator. So in Xamarin Forms 3.0, it's just better. And they've got a whole bunch of things there that they've added, even support for CSS style sheets in XAML, which is kind of weird. The remote simulator used to be only available for enterprise subscriptions. Now it's available for all subscriptions. So I think it's even like the community edition. And they now have support for the Apple Watch. The live player has been improved. It's free and cross-platform. It's pretty cool. So under Windows, there were a handful of things. Windows 10 on ARM, we got to see that. The thing that's cool about Windows 10 on ARM is it has 24 hours of battery life on those devices. but it still supports Win32 applications out of the box, and it runs with some special stuff that happens in that Qualcomm chip, and it's pretty snappy when we played with it. Yeah, sorry. I'm trying to get through this quickly. So that's kind of cool, something to look at in the future is that Windows 10 on ARM, which is coming. XAML islands and Windows UI controls. So UWP's gotten all the love the last few years with new kinds of controls and stuff like that. But now they're talking about it's not here yet, but in a future release, you'll be able to take those UWP controls and embed them in WPF and WinForm applications. If you have legacy applications, I know there's one person in here that cares about that for sure. That's John Worthington. He was really excited. The other kind of cool thing was WinUI controls. Those are kind of cool. Basically, what that allows us to do is each time we release a new version of Windows, there's some new cool controls that came out. For instance, this new tree view control that came out, which is touch sensitive and sensitive to pen and all that kind of stuff. Well, gosh, that'd be nice to put in the gospel library, but half of our users are still like on 4 releases back. Well, with UI controls, now you'll be able to pull that down in a NuGet package and still have that run on older releases of Windows. So they're doing some cool things there. All right, let's see if this thing plays. So watch closely if it plays, because what they showed with new Fluent Design is traditionally when we're laying out our apps and our web pages, we're moving things in X and Y. We need to start thinking in Z too. So here's some demos. Moving in 3 dimensions. I don't know if you could see that. But the reason that they're introducing that is for things like mixed reality and VR and new interfaces that are going to be able to come. You'll be able to stack panels in 3 dimensions and see them come out and walk behind a panel and stuff like that. So there's some sessions on that that are kind of interesting, but I won't dig into it too deep because I promised to go fast here. So let's go to the next one. They introduced Windows Timeline. If you've gotten the latest update to Windows 10, Timeline is a history of all the applications that you're using and what they've done. It's pretty cool. We can integrate our applications with Timeline, by the way. And then Windows Sets, which is coming. This is actually kind of really cool. I know most of you probably aren't big fans of Edge like I am, but one of the features that I really love in Edge is the ability to take your tabs and to collapse them down into and save them off as a set that goes together really well, and then pull it back later. If you're using Chrome, I've seen you guys using Chrome, and I've seen tabs that hold 1 letter apiece. I don't know how you find what you're looking for because you've got 500 tabs open at the same time. So this management is really kind of cool. And what they're doing is they're taking that idea in Edge and they're extending it into Windows. So now you can see here, I've got a bundle of applications working together, Document, Excel, a Word document, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, all bundled together, and I can press save and store those off as a set, and then pull those all back together again instead of opening each app over and over again. You can save them all up and rehydrate them all in one shot. Great for productivity. One thing that you notice at Build is if you attach the letters AI to it, it made it new. And so with AI inking, they're taking inking to the next level, and there's some pretty cool presentations on that as well, where you continue to write in natural form. I mean, think about this particular problem. If anybody's ever had to write a mathematical formula in like Word or in something like that by a keyboard, it sucks. But it's much easier to write with ink. So if you write it in ink, now it can take a look at that and express it in a proper formula. But even more than that, I was going to pull up a quick demo here. Let's see if I can do this. Hey, it's working pretty well today. This ink analysis thing. The other thing you can do is you can use AI and we can train models. And so this particular app is a sample app that has been trained to recognize things and recognize shapes. And that's not a great shape. I'm not very good at drawing things. And normalizing them. So, but with machine learning, we can train it to understand certain types of shapes. And so you can imagine the types of applications we can create with that moving forward. So, and I won't get into the details of that. Okay, there you go, one demo. All right, I'm almost done. So edge computing, I have some cool stuff there. This was actually pretty cool. One of the things like Danny was talking about is it'd be cool to use like the image recognition and the cognitive services in Azure, but for seminaries and institutes, for instance, we don't want to upload photos of minors up into the cloud for analysis and recognition. Well, now with ML.net, what that allows you to do is do that kind of processing locally in your application and do the modeling there. And then with Win-ML, that is the other side of it. So think of ML.net as the model creator and Win-ML as the model consumer. Both of those things now can be pushed out to the edge, pushed out to local devices and servers and used. I'll skip Video Indexer, but I'll just say that Video Indexer is pretty cool. What it allows you to do is you can upload a video there, and it will apply a bunch of stuff to it. So,
Use it on the keynote to find out where
yeah. So, like for instance, I uploaded a session of general conference to it, and it went through and identified all the people that appeared in that video. It happened to be the solemn assembly, so the cameras were cutting around to, all the apostles and stuff as they were announcing them. So it recognized all of them, and it made little circles for them. And in the UI, you could actually click on it and say, I want to see where President Nelson appears, and it shows you all the places where he appears in there for how long, and you can skip right to that spot. It transcribed everything. It did a sentiment analysis to kind of say, were people positive when they were speaking? Were they negative when they were speaking? Or was it neutral? And surprise, it was mostly neutral. Anyway, that's an edge computing device I have here if you want to see it. Video indexer. Oh, that's a bunch of stuff that it does. That's what it looks like. So that's the little bubbles there. You click on that and it tells you how long they've talked, where they've talked. It pulls out keywords, and it's pretty amazing. And finally, the web section, ASP.NET Core 2.1, they pushed a final RC release candidate. So release is imminent. EF Core's 2.1 release is imminent. Blazor is really cool. And then SignalR and SignalR Service. Blazor is this for anybody who's tired of fighting JavaScript and all of its nonsense. This is your savior. Blazor will allow you to use C# in the browser on the client side to do the nonsense that JavaScript has been doing for years and years. Yes, I know, it's crazy. Those are some of the things that if you want to see a demo, you can go to blazor-demo.github.io, and you can see it running, and it's not really all that amazing because you can't tell a difference, but that's kind of the whole point, right? And finally, last thing is SignalR. SignalR and SignalR Azure Services. If anybody's ever used SignalR, you know it's a real-time bidirectional communication protocol for the web that wraps things like WebSockets and stuff like that. So I have a demo of that one that I built. If you guys want to go give that a shot, go to SignalR DNEF, which stands for .NET Engineering Forum, .azurewebsites.net, or if you want to do it from your phone, just go ahead and point the camera at the QR code there, and there's a chance that'll work. Okay, while you guys are doing that, hopefully you got there. If not, so I'm going to pull it up here real quick. So I just built this morning. I haven't really tested it. So SignalR dnef.azurewebsites.net. And so what this application will do, I'm going to go ahead and connect, is it's real time. There's a server up there, and the server is keeping track of everyone that's connected, and we'll all be joined and connected together. And so don't say anything too bad. I'll say, hello, forum. And anyone who's connected will have gotten the hello forum message. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate you. Along with that, I created a little game that wasn't working until right before we had to come down here. So how do you bleed? Do you bleed red or do you bleed blue? So if you click on the button that represents how you bleed, and if it works, you can see that it's fighting back and forth between red and blue. Oh, red's winning. So real time, what's happening is you guys, as you're clicking the button, it's sending that to the server and broadcasting it out to all of you and all of the clients at the same time. And so as you push those buttons back and forth, it's sending values of red and blue and pushing that back. So, okay, that's not really terribly useful, but you can imagine how you can use this in your applications. If you have long-running things, for instance, if you're going to the time card application that's taking a long time to go process something, you can be elsewhere in the site, and this can stay connected in the background. When it's done, it can push to you as the client and say, hey, this is done now. And that's SignalR kind of wrapped up in a nutshell, and that was my last slide. So there you go. Those were a few of my favorite things. Thanks.